Today I'm going to talk to you about a really well thought out smartphone. A company known as Verney, which to be honest doesn't really have much of a production budget behind it, has put together a phone that I think will amaze you. This is the Verney Thor Plus, which does an exceptional job of correcting people's biggest concern when it comes to smartphones, and that is battery life. First of all, it's got a 6,200 mAh capacity inside, which on one hand on its own is already double the capacity that most manufacturers use for their smartphones, but when you combine it alongside all the power saving tricks that the company has implemented, you get a staggering battery life out of it. They've implemented a 5.5-inch AMOLED display with a 1280 by 720p resolution, and this makes a lot of sense for two reasons. First of all, the 1280 by 720 resolution means that battery drain is kept to an absolute minimum, but implementing an AMOLED display, you not only get lots of power saving because black pixels effectively turn off, but also in terms of color reproduction, I'd say it looks better than a lot of 1080p displays I've seen. It has really rich contrast, really vibrant colors, and therefore as a result, that alone gives a lot of definition to what you're viewing on the display. It doesn't end there, because Verney has bundled in an ultra power saving mode, which not only turns the display black and white, but drastically reduces the brightness and also takes you to a special menu, where you can either call, text, enter your calendar, or select one of 3 applications of your choice. Now that's all well and good, other companies have done this before as well. It is effective, but it's not necessarily unique. What Verney has done with the Thor though is also created a dedicated hardware key for you to press and automatically flick between the 2 modes. So say for example you're on your last 5% of battery and you're really trying to save every drop, what you can do is every time after using it, simply tap that button, put it in your pocket, and all of a sudden all the connections are going to be automatically cut, no apps are going to be able to sync in the background, and the display is using basically nothing. It's also nice to see that Verney has put the effort in to make a quick charge functionality. Now it's not the fastest out there, but with a 9V 2A arrangement, it's not slow either. You can pretty much fully charge that battery in about 3 hours. So taking all of this into account, and providing you take advantage of the battery saving features on offer, you're looking at up to 4 days of usage, which is crazy. What's perhaps even more impressive than the battery itself is how the company has managed to fit it in a body where you can barely tell it's there. So it's not the most svelte phone, it's not razor thin like we've seen with the Oppo R11, but at the same time holding it next to a smartphone which perhaps has half the battery life that this does, and you really can't tell that much of a difference. It's 8.7mm thick and it's got a weight of 188 grams. So even with a matte aluminium finish on the rear, it's a little bit lighter than I was expecting it to be. Now the rear material of the phone is kind of slippy, but the phone, because of its weight, has quite a prominent center of gravity that keeps it secure in your hands. One thing I wasn't a huge fan of is that even though this is a matte finish, it does attract quite a few fingerprints. And then because it is a matte finish, the fingerprints you've got on there are a little bit harder to remove than if you had a glossy finish. Now the phone is also really rather fast. The company has done away with pretty much every bit of bloatware on the operating system, and you're running more or less a stock version of Android 7.0. Now that is a bit of a shame that we haven't seen Android 7.1 on here, but unless you wanted those specific extra features, in terms of the performance you really can't tell the difference. Everything from the application opening time to the fingerprint unlocking time feels almost instantaneous. And that's in part due to the fact that the company has minimized on its transition time, but also just because there's good optimization going on here. The MT6753 combined with 3GB of RAM gives it a fair bit of grunt for gaming, especially because it doesn't have quite as many pixels to push as a 1080p panel, so it's a little bit easier on the CPU. The Antutu score over here is not particularly impressive, but as you can see for yourself, it doesn't really tell the full story. So then we move on to the 13MP camera, which I was really taken aback by. To the untrained eye, and when you're just scanning it, it looks like any other generic 13MP sensor. But actually, it captures some really good photos. The first thing I notice is that it has a really good focus range, so you can get right up to objects really close to them and still keep them in focus, which is something you don't see on budget smartphones like this. Now we've also got loads of detail in there, and plenty of light as well. We've got an f2.0 aperture, so it also gets some decent bokeh effects. The only thing I did notice is that the shutter time is quite long, so to capture these photos you do have to hold the phone very steady. And another implication of this is that the HDR mode is even harder to use, because effectively that's going to double your shutter time again. Unfortunately, the phone does have an Achilles heel in the form of its speaker, so it's a single mono output positioned on the left of the home button, and it's very fuzzy. It produces a tinny sound with also not a lot of volume. The only saving grace here is that if you do prefer to listen via headphones, the output from the 3.5mm jack sounds absolutely fine. As a bit of a cherry on top, the phone also has 32GB of internal storage, followed by another 128 via an SD card. But there we go, that is the Verney Thor Plus, and if you can overlook its few inconsistencies, it's actually an outstanding device for really not a lot of money. It's got a good camera and display, it's got a great level of performance, and it's got a battery life that is literally off the charts. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.